Sup fools, how's it going, and welcome to another Tutorial Thursday. Titty. And today we're going to talk about how to do a slow motion effect. Let's begin. Titty. In order to shoot slow motion clips like this, what you need is a camera which is capable of shooting with a higher frame rate. Because essentially how slow motion works is you have more frames available than you actually need. For a regular video like this one, I shoot 24 frames per second. So if I wanted to use this clip with half the speed, I would need 50 frames per second. But because I didn't shoot this with 50 frames and I would use a slow motion effect, that wouldn't look right. It would look very laggy. So that's why I would need a camera which is capable of shooting 50 frames per second, 60 frames per second, 120, maybe 240 frames per second. And we all have one right here. A phone is capable of doing that these days. It can get very pricey to get a camera which is capable of doing that. Those two cameras, they are able to shoot 120 frames per second, which is basically 5 times slower than the 24 frames that I'm using here right now. So when I shoot that in 120 frames per second, then in my editing software I can slow it down to 20% and then I have a smooth slow motion. If I shot it with 50 frames per second, I can slow it down by 50%. So it really depends on the frame rate you are using, how slow you can make your footage in post. And also, it's very important that we have a thing called shutter speed. Right now I use a shutter of 1/50th because you always double your frame rate. I shoot in a frame rate of 24 frames per second. I double it. It's a shutter of 1/50th to have the most natural motion blur. So when I shoot in 120 frames per second, I need to use a shutter of 1/240th. Double the frame rate. But that also means that the entire frame is going to get darker because a faster shutter also means that less light is going to go into the lens because the shutter basically closes, and the faster the shutter, the less light comes in. If I used a shutter of 1 second or so, then the shutter would shut like this very slowly, so the more light comes in, but then I have lots of motion blur. So the rule of thumb is make the shutter always twice as big as your frame rate. So then when you import your footage into Premiere, all you have to do is having a 24 frames per second sequence. This is important. And then when you have your footage in there, it doesn't do anything yet. It's still the normal speed if you shoot on a normal camera, not a high-speed camera. But to make it slow-mo, then you can just right-click on the clip, then on speed and duration, and then click on the percentage and type in 20 if it's 120 frames per second. If it's 50 frames per second, then it's 50%. And then voila, you see it's in slow motion. So I hope that was helpful, and if you have any questions about that, please let me know in the comments below, and see you in the next Tutorial Thursday. Titty. See you later.